Now, what kind of country are we living in? What kind of men got this whole world giving in? And when I say giving in, I mean giving up. When everything you're given ain't never enough. Well, I look up to a man that always wants more. That man, he ain't happy of this, you'll be sure. Forever blind, never finding what he's looking for. Dreams of the sea with no love for the shore. Gotta be the right, cause I ain't that way. I simply still believe I got something to say. And if you don't believe, hey man, that's okay. Marcus J still gonna say it anyway. Every day we only getting closer to the end. Running out of time to define what I've penned. Running out of time, that'll never come again. Yo doc, this ain't no kind of country for old men.
Never give in, never stop, never bend, cause this country has no rightful place for old men. Never give in, never stop, never bend, cause this country has no rightful place for old men. Never give in, never stop, never bend, cause this country has no rightful place for old men. Never give in, never stop, never bend, cause this country has no rightful place for old men. A failed businessman, yeah, he's just gonna fail us. Doubt anyone gonna be left to come bail us out. And out of touch, everything from his throat like it's 1984. While I bump all and notes, I take notes on these suckers and all that they speak. It's all weak, my critique's not unique. Their antique worldview treats us like cattle. They rattle and slaughter. We oughta spit back when they piss and color water. My father and mother taught better than you. If there's one thing I've learned, there's a shade to the truth, and the proof is not put in the pudding. I'm looking for footing for when they start shoving and pushing, because they are pissed at your face. It's your racist and baseless, abrasive statements that disgrace shit is gonna get worse before it's getting better. So I'd better put this all down in a letter and never give in, never stop, never bend, cause this country has no rightful place for old men. Never give in, never stop, never bend, cause this country has no rightful place for old men. Never give in, never stop, never bend, cause this country has no rightful place for old men. Never give in, never stop, never bend, cause this country has no rightful place for old men.
The White House released a cabinet memo earlier today that summarized the actions and accomplishments of the State Department over the course of these last 4 years. The State Department's core responsibilities are to protect the American people at home and to abroad, and also to advance our interests and our values. That is what we do every single day. And nowhere, I think, has that been more pronounced than in our campaign to take on and defeat the terrorist group known as Daesh, or in some quarters, ISIL. At President Obama's direction, we here worked overtime to assemble a 68-nation coalition that has come together from across the globe to oppose a genocidal enemy waging war on civilization itself. Now remember, just 2 years ago, these thugs were rampaging across the Middle East. I think everybody here can remember the images of convoys of Toyotas waving black flags and triumphantly parading through the desert and through community after community as they threatened the entire stability of the region. And we can all recall, some of us perhaps much more vividly than we might like to remember because of intelligence briefings, the videos, the horrific videos of people being beheaded, burned alive, and the panicky predictions that Daesh was about to redraw the entire map of the Middle East. I ask you just to go back to those months and review a few days of the discussions to get back in touch with the fear and the impending sense of doom that a lot of people felt. The President of the United States made an immediate decision then to deploy American air power and to guarantee the safety of Baghdad, indeed the security of Iraq and the region itself. And together with our coalition members and friends, we did not let the worst happen. We turned it around. Our strategy has been to rehabilitate Iraq's military, to kill Daesh's leaders, to demolish their revenue sources, to curb their recruitment, to rebut their poisonous ideas, and to support our local partners as they liberate the towns and the communities that Daesh once occupied. I'm proud to tell you that that plan has in fact been working. Today, Kobani is free, Tikrit is free, Fallujah is free, Ramadi is free, and in time, Mosul, where there's about a 60% liberation of the eastern side of the community, is inexorably going to be free. And then RAQQA. And before long, Daesh's phony caliphate is going to have been turned to dust. Now, that doesn't mean that the whole threat of Daesh is gone all of a sudden. No, it isn't. Daesh obviously continues to adapt in certain ways to these changing circumstances. And so the threat adapts with it. And they will most likely try to establish new footholds or to instigate and to inspire isolated attacks. We have seen some of that, obviously, through social media. But the bottom line remains that we have made enormous gains over the course of these 2 years. And we have done it without betraying our democratic ideals, without betraying our democratic values, or changing our way of life. So we are on the right path, both diplomatically and militarily, and we need to stay on that course. And I guarantee you that over the period of this next year and into the future, Daesh is going to be thoroughly defeated. We also need to remember that we will not defeat these terrorists anywhere, at any place, without the help from the one group that has been most victimized by terrorism, and that is our friends and our partners in the Islamic world itself.
To follow up on that, the Turkish president said yesterday, I believe, that they're anticipating being able to retake Al-Bab shortly, and then after them they're going to focus on other towns, most notably Manbij, where he said where terrorists are resting. Are you aware of any other significant terrorist forces that are currently holed up in Manbij? The last we heard, that town had been liberated.
Our assessment of Manbij has not changed, that ISIL's been defeated in Manbij, and we think that's a good thing. That's a significant thing. There were significant efforts made by the coalition and others to make that happen, and we believe the best focus right now is, again, to remain focused on ISIL wherever it may be, and the coalition's assessment right now is that ISIL is in other parts of Syria.
So with this apparent pledge from the Turkish president, what concerns do you have that the Turkish armed forces might be going after the Kurdish forces that are currently in Manbij, securing it?
Again, the focus for the coalition for the United States remains on ISIL, and we think that should be the focus of the coalition.
And then moving over to Iraq, Colonel Dorrian said yesterday there are about 450 coalition advisors now involved in the MOSUL operation, including some who have gone into the city. Can you say at what level now U.S. advisors are embedded with headquarters of the conventional Iraqi units? I know the last we heard, I thought it was at the division level, but they had clearance to go farther down. Do you know how far down the chain of command?
I think we've talked about this in the past, that there have been separate from the Special Operations Forces, that the There is the capability, the authority to go down to the battalion level. And there has been at least one instance in the past. Specifically, we talked about it, the efforts with an engineering unit that assisted with bridging related to the movements around Kiara. And I'm not aware of it extending beyond that at this point. But I also can't rule it out. General Townsend has this authority to use as he sees fit. But I'm not aware that it's been used beyond that.
So is it safe to say then that the Americans who are advising the Iraqi forces in Mosul are with either CTS or the PESH then?
I think, again, they're with headquarters elements in most cases. With the conventional Iraqi forces, they're at providing advice and assistance at the division levels with the leadership. And I can't tell you with, again, precision here, because I honestly don't know whether General Townsend has used that more recently at a lower level. But again, there are some of those headquarters elements are moving as the forward line of troops moves. That certainly there are Iraqi commanders who are closer to Mosul now than they were previously, and our folks are providing advice and assistance to them. Likewise, though, I want to make clear that not all these folks are specifically tied to Mosul. We have advisors right now, for example, in Baghdad. We have advisors at various locations, installations that may be supporting Mosul. I'll mention Kiara again, Camp Swift. So we have forces in a variety of positions, advisors in a variety of positions, not necessarily right even on the outskirts of Mosul. So that's a countrywide figure that I believe Colonel Dorrian referred to.
I'll go back to the carrier announcement that
Yeah.
you made for a minute. So, you know, the Defense Department, the Navy, always likes to talk about aircraft carriers as a symbol of U.S. military presence in the far corners of the world. But it's been days, if not weeks now, since you have had a carrier either deployed in the far western Pacific, vis-a-vis the Korean Peninsula, or in the Persian Gulf. So in both cases, starting with the presence to counter North Korea, while you have other assets, what should people take away from the fact that the Navy has not had a deployable carrier for weeks in the two acknowledged hotspots, the Persian Gulf and off Korea?
There's a significant amount of PKK fighters on that mountain. Prime Minister Abadi and KRG officials have asked the PKK to leave the mountain and go back to their places. What is the U.S. position on that? Do you think they are helping on securing the area from ISIS infiltration, or what is your position on that?
I think, Prime Minister Abadi, Iraq is a sovereign government. Prime Minister Abadi speaks on behalf of the Iraqi government, and the PKK, as you know, is a terrorist organization designated by the United States. And we're supportive of what President Abadi has said on this front, and remains a concern, of course. Again, Iraq is a sovereign government. The Prime Minister has spoken on this issue, and we're supportive of what Prime Minister Abadi has had to say.
Going back to what Lita and Paul were talking about, you said that the focus of the coalition is on the Islamic State, and we believe that should be the focus. But what is the consequence if that's no longer the focus? Have you been talking with your allies about the consequences should they not focus on Islamic State? And then also, can you follow up to talk about Turkey's role? I know Turkey wants to have a role in the fight for RAQQA, and the U.S. has been saying that this is a part of ongoing negotiations. Where is the U.S. and Turkey on that?
Again, Carla, we're talking every day with our Turkish ally about these issues, and these are important issues. Turkey has significant concerns given the threat ISIL poses to Turkey. We've seen ISIL's own claims of responsibility for this most recent nightclub shooting, and we share Turkey's interest in defeating ISIL, delivering ISIL a lasting defeat, and we think there's important progress that still needs to be made on that, in that effort, and that Turkey can be a key player and is a key player in that, has a significant interest in that. The United States, the rest of the coalition have a significant interest. So We want to remain coordinated in that effort. We want to maintain pressure on as many fronts as possible, particularly at this moment in time when ISIL finds itself under assault both in Syria and in Iraq and Mosul specifically, and around RAQQA specifically. We think there's an opportunity here to accelerate this campaign even further, to put even more pressure on ISIL, and that remains the focus. All of our efforts are intended to accelerate this campaign against ISIL, to keep the most pressure possible on ISIL, and that's the conversation we're having, not just with Turkey, but with all of our coalition partners.
Can you confirm that they will take some sort of role in the operation to take RAQQA?
Again, that conversation is ongoing. I'll let the Turkish government speak for itself, but certainly we're talking to all of our coalition partners about the next steps in the campaign, the most efficient and effective way to do that, and again, speed matters here. We want to move quickly. We've got ISIL under pressure right now, and we want to keep it that way. We want to accelerate, turn up that pressure if we can.
Would you say that the most effective way to move forward is to go into cities that have already been removed from Islamic State control?
I think I spoke to that previously. We think we should go after ISIL where ISIL is.
In Syria, the Syrian Democratic Forces, led by their Syrian Arab coalition, are continuing their advance to isolate RAQQA along two axes, supported by coalition forces providing advice and assistance, and coalition air power delivering counter-ISIL strikes to RAQQA's north and west. Since this current phase began on December 9th, the SDF have liberated more than 500 square miles of Syrian land, home to tens of thousands of people who have been brutalized by ISIL's rule. Coalition airstrikes removed a significant number of ISIL fighters, more than 70 vehicles and 200 fortifications from the battlefield. This degrades ISIL's ability to maneuver and defend the occupied cities. Of these strikes, more than 100 have taken place in the vicinity of Tabqa Dam, killing many ISIL fighters, including Abu Jandal al-Kuwaiti. As you know, Kuwaiti, a prominent foreign fighter and leader, had been sent to improve ISIL's control in the region in the face of SDF's advance. Recovering the Tabqa Dam from ISIL will result in return Syria's largest dam to the Syrians, further allowing them to reclaim their homes and their liberty. We're working with our SDF partners to ensure the dam is effectively and safely recovered. ISIL has used the dam as a headquarters, a prison for high-profile hostages, and a training and indoctrination area for leaders since they seized control of it in 2013. Loss of this key terrain will damage the enemy's prospects and legitimacy as they continue to lose territory. In Iraq, Iraqi security forces have made significant progress since initiating Phase 2 of their operation to liberate Mosul on the 29th of December. For Phase 2, Iraqi forces synchronized simultaneous attacks from three axes into the city, with elements of the Iraqi Counterterrorism Service, the Iraqi Army, and the Iraqi Federal Police conducting the operation. What we're finding is that the synchronized attacks present the enemy with more problems than they can solve, and the Iraqi security forces are making progress with the continued benefit of coalition strikes and advisors. The axes are beginning to converge as the Iraqis make progress toward the Tigris. In Mosul and other areas around Iraq, precision coalition airstrikes have continued attacking ISIL leaders who facilitate and command and control the terrorist network. The latest examples are 3 ISIL facilitators and terrorist leaders from occupied cities. I can confirm the deaths of Imad Abdullah Hamad al-Mahlawi, Abu Turk, and Falah al-Rashidi. Al-Rashidi, struck in December 4th in Mosul, was an ISIL leader who was involved in ISIL's use of VBIDs in Mosul. His removal further degrades ISIL's VBID threat, which has been the enemy's weapon of choice for attacking Iraqi security forces and civilians. Al-Mahlawi, struck December 21st in Al-Qaim, was a legacy Al-Qaeda Iraq member, serving as an ISIL leader in Al-Qaim. His removal will disrupt ISIL's ability to conduct operations along the Euphrates River Valley. This is significant because as ISIL continues to lose population centers, they want to transition towards spoiler attacks in the outlying areas of Iraq and Syria. The loss of Mahlawi degrades ISIL's ability to make that transition. Abu Turk, struck on December 4th in Sharqat, was an ISIL financial facilitator in Khanfousa, Iraq, who had connections to ISIL leaders and facilitated funds to the group. He was killed by an airstrike while fighting from the rooftop position in Sharqat, where he and several other fighters were moving a heavy weapon to fire upon partner forces. His removal increases pressure on the ISIL financial network, which is already severely disrupted by several hundred strikes on oil infrastructure and bulk cash sites. Finally, I want to show you an important example of the impact of strikes against the enemy's networks. If you would, please bring up that image. The image that you're seeing now is a screen capture from an ISIL Amaq News propaganda video decrying a recent coalition strike against a vehicle that the enemy had been using to transport weapons. The enemy was trying to accuse the coalition of attacking near a protected site. However, they neglected to notice that their own propaganda video confirms the presence of the recoilless rifles that we observed them firing at the ISF. As you recall, the coalition has heavily targeted the ISIL propaganda machine. This is what happens when the enemy relies on less capable people as their subject matter experts are eliminated. And with that, I'll be happy to take your questions.
We'll start with Bob.
Sure, Bob. One of the things that's really important to understand about the ongoing battle in Mosul is that the city is completely surrounded and the enemy doesn't have the ability to resupply or reinforce their fighters. They're increasingly isolated on the eastern side of the city because of the damage that's been done to the bridges that are there. So they don't have the ability to bring over resources or fighters from the west. And what that means is that as their resources dwindle, and to be clear, there's been a lot of discussion about the losses that Iraqis are taking, the enemy is taking in order of magnitude greater. They don't have the ability to resupply or reinforce those fighters. So as the Iraqis move along 3 different axes, they don't have the resources to defend all 3. So what they're having to do is make hard choices to defend one or another, or defend each of them more weakly. And what happens then is the Iraqis are able to move more decisively against them.
Next to Idris Ali with Reuters.
Thank you. Yesterday we were told that U.S.-led coalition jets flew over or near Al-Bab at the request of the Turkish government. I believe a month and a half ago, you said the U.S.-led coalition was not supporting that operation. So I guess with these flights, are you now supporting and going to continue supporting Turkey?
Well, Turkish operations in Al-Bab have been a subject of ongoing diplomatic and leader discussion between the coalition, between the United States and Turkey. This is something that's been ongoing for several weeks. And I know that at a higher level, there have been discussions at the diplomatic level about the way ahead. So we have definitely, I have seen the reporting on that event where we had forces and air support to the Turkish forces that were there. This was a show of force that was conducted at the request of the Turkish forces that were operating on the ground. And we do expect that there will be some ongoing support to Turkish operations in and around Al-Bab.
What do you mean by ongoing support? Is it just going to be continuing flying over and not dropping ordnance, or if you could explain that a bit more?
Yep, I really can't get into the details of what types of support are going to be offered, but I can confirm for you that those discussions have been happening, and the Turks are aware of some of the things that might be in store. So I can't get ahead of those discussions. We kind of have to leave it where it is. I hope you understand.
Sorry, just to be clear, you are now supporting their move on Al-Bab when you previously were not.
Well, we supported with a show of force recently, and there are ongoing discussions about the manner in which we'll support in the future. So I'm not going to get into the details of what is in store, but that's where it is right now. Yeah, I'm afraid I can't go into those kinds of details. Frankly, I'm not privy to them. But one of the things that's very important to understand here is how much we value the Turkish support to the fight against Daesh. The work that they've done in the northern part of Syria to isolate that border and stop infiltration into and out of the region has been invaluable. It's very important, and it's also, along that theme of giving the enemy more problems to solve than they have the command and control structure to do. It's also important on that level. So we have ongoing operations throughout Iraq. We have ongoing operations with partner forces in Syria. We have ongoing operations with the Turkish military and their partnered force. And we do have ongoing discussions between our countries and coalition to increase the amount of support and the participation that we'll be providing to Turkey as they move forward in Al-Bab.
Previously, when, for example, previously the defense officials would say, wherever we see Daesh fighters, we kill them. However, this time we see that you apparently have seen them and didn't kill them, rather you just do a show of force sortie over them. Could you just explain what was the reason why the aircraft didn't drop ordnance on these Daesh fighters firing at Turkish forces?
Sure. The cardinal rule of close air support is to do no harm. And if you don't have forces on the ground and weather, does not enable you to see exactly what you're firing at, you can create more danger for forces on the ground than you solve with the strike. So we conducted the operation that we could conduct at that time, and that's what we could do right then. And this is something, there are limitations that are driven by weather. They're driven by limitations in intelligence information that we have. But when we do have good fidelity on where the enemy is and where our partner forces are in relation to the enemy, then we do exactly as you described. We will strike enemy targets anywhere that they can be found. Yeah, we do have coalition forces in northern Syria. We do have forces that are working with the Turkish military all the time. So this is something that's ongoing. As far as exactly where they are in relation to, Al-Bab, we really don't get into the disposition of our forces exactly where they're operating from. But our forces are talking to the Turkish military all the time. We have ongoing working relationships to share intelligence and that sort of thing. As far as the details of what's going to be offered, I just can't get into that with you. I can confirm, though, that there have been some good discussions at much higher levels about what type of support there would be. So we'll just let that play out. That's a discussion at a higher level than I'm privy to. I hope you understand. I just don't have that insight to offer right now.
Thanks. Last one, Colonel. Today, Turkish officials in the cabinet levels, including the defense minister and the foreign minister, criticize U.S. for using Incirlik air base but not supporting Turkish forces in Al-Bab. And the defense minister said clearly that we're going to reconsider the use of Incirlik air base. So could you please give us some details how Incirlik air base is playing crucial role in the operations right now? And are you using Incirlik base in Iraq or just in Syria? And a little bit on the use of Incirlik air base, as I said. Could you give us a few details about how it is crucial for the coalition?
That are really important to the ongoing operations against Daesh are our provision of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to our partnered forces, and also our conduct of strikes against the enemy and his resources. So both of those things have been ongoing from Incirlik Air Base. It's absolutely invaluable, the base, and what capabilities it's made available for the coalition. Indeed, really the entire world has been made safer by the operations that have been conducted there. So it's a very important base to the coalition and to the ongoing fight against Daesh.
Are you concerned that Turkey could take a decision or could decide that to limit the coalition operations from Incirlik? Do you have any concern like that?
Well, it'd be inappropriate for me to speculate about that. I can tell you that there's been ongoing discussion at very high levels between our two governments, between the coalition and Turkey, about the invaluable resource that Incirlik is, and how invaluable the participation of Turkey has been in coalition operations against Daesh. One of the things that we've tried to do very closely is to just orchestrate between all the coalition nations and all the partners in this very complex battle space, where everyone is and what they're doing, to try to have multiple axes and multiple areas in which ISIL's being attacked. So even as these discussions are ongoing, and I will certainly grant you that there's been a robust back and forth about those. There has been a tremendous amount of excellent work, all focused against defeating Daesh, and we are going to do what we can to try and make sure that that continues.
And that report was very critical of what the U.S. had done. There was a failure to arm the Peshmerga properly and to provide proper maintenance facilities for that equipment. But since they didn't have the equipment, I suppose it didn't matter they didn't have the maintenance facilities. But I wondered now, have those problems been corrected that the IG report pointed to?
Well, I'm familiar with the report that you're referencing, but I don't know that I can say that every single thing in that report has been addressed. I can tell you that there's been a substantial effort to arm and equip the Peshmerga to do what they need to do in order to support operations in northern Iraq. And their role has been absolutely magnificent. The cooperation between them and the government of Iraq and the Iraqi security forces has enabled the operation in MOSUL to progress. And we do plan on continuing that. So if as far as specifically everything in that report, I think I'd have to get back to you on the status of each thing that you're asking about.
On the two big issues of whether the promised arms have been, all delivered and maintenance facilities are there, that I'd be most grateful. The report did provide a very positive picture of the Peshmerga forces, that they were responsive to criticisms. They even had, if you recall, pictures of there was criticism about how munitions were being stored in a warehouse, and then they showed another picture a month later, and they had taken care of the problem. So it seemed that they were really working very cooperatively with the Americans. And so, is that a legitimate conclusion that I'm reaching there?
It's definitely a legitimate conclusion that they've been very cooperative and very forward-leaning and very effective in defeating Daesh. So as far as the details of where all those items are, I think I'd have to just follow up with you to give you a specificity. I wouldn't want to get ahead of my headlights and give you information that's incorrect. Yep, this, the battle for Mosul, I've gotten a lot of questions about why it's taking a significant amount of time. The thing that you have to understand about Mosul, there are several things. The first is that the enemy's had more than 2 years to prepare for the battle that's now ongoing. So they have a tremendous amount of weaponry and resources, and they've had a tremendous amount of time to dig elaborate defenses and establish booby traps to complicate the Iraqi security forces' advance. At the same time, they also have shown no reluctance whatsoever to attack civilians or use civilians as shields, and this slows things down. And then there are more than 200,000 buildings in Mosul. And really, in order to do this properly, given the way that the enemy has conducted themselves, you end up having to clear each one. And that goes from rooftop level, often in 4-story or higher buildings, through every single room and every single closet, and into tunnels that have been dug between these buildings and sometimes beneath them. And it's just slow going, and it's just going to take some time. Now, what I would say is the Iraqi security forces have done a tremendous job of doing that very, very dangerous mission and protecting civilians as they do it. But it's going to take time. It's going to be extraordinarily dangerous. And the Iraqis have definitely made sacrifices in order to do it. I think they're to be commended for the way that they've conducted themselves with tactical patience. And what we're seeing now is that this method, this 3 axes of advance, where they're beginning to converge, is starting to really make things very difficult for the enemy. But that, once they get to the river, they're going to go into the west side, and then, it'll be another very tough fight there as well. Well, there have been, a number of things that have been done in order to accelerate the advance of the Iraqi security forces. Certainly, we've continued to conduct strikes against the enemy. We've also increased the number of advise and assist forces that are there with the Iraqi security forces command elements to help advise them as they move forward and to synchronize operations. The Iraqis have taken advantage of that, and that's been effective. If there are any other things that need to be done in order to do that, I'm sure that there would be a request made through the appropriate channels, and that would be General Townsend and his leadership team to CENTCOM and up to the Secretary of Defense and the White House for approval. I would give you a ballpark, maybe around 450 or so advise and assist forces for the Iraqi security forces. That is right about double what we had been doing before.
So just to be clear, what was the time period over which those numbers doubled, and are they actually, how far forward are they? Are they actually inside the city of Mosul, or are they outside the city limits?
Well, the arrangements for the increase in advise and assist forces was made to support phase 2 of the operation. So it's been in the last couple of weeks. And then, I'm sorry, your second question is where they are. They've advised the Iraqi security forces as they move forward. They remain behind the forward line of troops. As far as specifically where they are, we probably won't get into nth degree detail. They have been in the city at different times, yes.
And then, can you just, I know it's 2 different countries and 2 different cities and everything, but is there any way that you can compare how you just went into detail about how dug in ISIS is in Mosul? Can you compare that to RAQQA at all? As far as what the fight there that you expect the SDF to see there, do you expect ISIS to be even more dug in, to be even more booby traps? Is there any way to compare those two based on the fact that now the SDF are now within 20 or 30 miles of the city?
Well, what I would say is that RAQQA is about 25% the size of MOSUL. Still a very large metropolitan area and still going to be very dense urban fighting, and it'll be very, very tough there. I think what we will see is a comparable level of enemy activity to dig in and fight there. So it'll probably be a similar fight, but then, you know, smaller.
What kind of troops these are? Are these engineers, these special operations forces, or these intelligence soldiers?
I would say probably all of the above.
Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki is on a visit to Iran right now and meeting with the Ayatollah. Is that at all a concern to senior U.S. leaders?
No, you know, Iran is a neighboring country with Iraq. They're going to have diplomatic relations, and those types of things are very routine and ongoing. And, you know, we remain focused on fighting Daesh. They're coalition advisors. I'm a coalition spokesperson, coalition advisors.
But are they Americans? But are they American coalition members?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into a breakdown of which nation does which number of advisors. I can't do that from memory, I'm afraid. But there are coalition nations other than the U.S. that provide advisory.
Just for clarity's sake, I thought you discussed that in the context of Secretary Carter's decision to increase the number of advisors, or did I misunderstand? In other words, it sounded like we were talking about Americans, but now you're saying we weren't, or you're not talking about Americans, or you might not be talking about Americans. Could you be more clear on that?
I never brought up the secretary at all, so I'm not sure where you got that from. We have American advisors, and we have other nations that are also advising.
When I asked my question about the advisors, I specifically asked about Americans going into Mosul with the advisors. So that still stands, right? There are Americans that have gone in and out as advisors as part of this new 450?
Yes, that's correct. These are coalition forces that are already in country.
And any other follow-ups? Good to go. Yeah, Kasim.
On Mosul, but it's a something. There were reports in the past that the United States and Turkey established a joint military delegation, sent them to Manbij to oversee the withdrawal of YPG elements, and you know, we didn't hear anything more about that. Has this initiative failed, or is it still continues? Could you update us, please?
I can tell you that institution continues. It continues to exist. I'm not going to get. I didn't at that time get into the details of what they are doing or what their discussions are, but they do. Yeah, we're still doing that.
Iraqi officials report that 2/3 of East Mosul is now in government hands, and the resumption of offensive operations since December 29th has resulted in steady progress against ISIL in Mosul. Meanwhile, in Syria, the Syrian Democratic Forces are also seeing significant results against ISIL in the drive towards RAQQA. Key ISIL-held terrain near Tabqa is now under increasing pressure. In all, they have captured more than 2,000 square kilometers of territory since their isolation operations began.
At the end of last year, a senior U.S. military official said that 50,000 ISIS fighters had been killed in the last few years by the U.S. military in Iraq and Syria. I'm trying to understand those numbers, since the Pentagon and other intelligence agencies have always estimated that there were only 20,000 to 30,000 ISIS fighters when the fight started, and even in subsequent months. So where do you get this 50,000 figure, and can you walk us through that number?
Yeah, we've had that question a couple times. And first of all, again, a senior Defense Department official provided you that number, which that was their prerogative to do. It's not a number that we talk about publicly, because it's not a good metric of success, and it's not an easy number to determine for all the reasons you would think about. This is a war zone. This is a conflict. Much of our efforts are being conducted from the air. We don't necessarily have the ability to assess everything on the ground in the way we might like. And so there have been a variety of estimates. I know the Iraqis have had some estimates as well. And so there isn't a good number for us to share with you, because we don't have great confidence in that number.
Okay, so you would dispute that number, perhaps?
I don't know if it's right or wrong. Yes?
Has the U.S. coalition or U.S. aircraft supported Turkish operations in Al-Bab recently?
My understanding that last week there was a request when some Turkish forces came under fire for air support, and there were flights conducted by the coalition at that time. But we continue to talk, Qasim, as you know, on a daily basis with our Turkish colleagues about their operations in Al-Bab and the serious fight and the serious effort that the Turkish forces there and the Syrian forces there, being supported by the government of Turkey, are engaged in, and the important fight that they have against ISIL in that area.
You mentioned it as a flight rather than some kind of strike, and we haven't seen any kind of strikes around Al-Bab from the coalition daily releases. So is it just some kind of a sorties that you conducted down there, or these aircraft conducting airstrikes?
My understanding that was there was not a strike specifically, but there were aircraft involved in that effort, a visible show of force, if you will, by coalition aircraft. And we continue to talk with the government of Turkey about the appropriate level of support for the efforts there in Al-Bab, and that's an ongoing conversation. Conversations even happening today.
What's the point of talking between Turkey and the U.S. in that?
Because we are coordinating carefully our effort against ISIL. Our comprehensive effort against ISIL. We want to continue to apply pressure on ISIL on as many fronts as possible, and we're trying to do that in the most efficient and effective way possible. We're trying to deconflict issues in the area as well, as you know, and so we'll continue to have that conversation. We see the very significant efforts that the Turkish military is engaging in Syria, the sacrifice of Turkish forces in Syria, the significant sacrifices, and obviously supportive of everything they're doing to try and take on ISIL, and the coalition is as well.
Yeah, but the thing that I'm not understanding is this. I don't understand is this. You know, when it was Jarablus, it was others in other parts of Syria, Davik, the coalition support was unprecedented, and the talks didn't really last any kind of months. But when it comes to Al-Bab, there is a certain reservation by the United States down for this town, I believe, or is it correct? Because, you know, talks have been continuing for 4 weeks, and then Turks in the end just started to cooperate with Russians in the city against ISIS. So don't you think that it's a failure of the United States just to keep partners together down in fight against ISIS in Syria?
No, I don't. We continue to talk every day with our Turkish ally about these issues, and we continue to coordinate very carefully with Turkey on these issues. And I'm not going to get into every private discussion that's happening there, but one of the reasons we're able to feel confident about what's happening and what's going forward is because of that level of coordination at all levels with the Turkish government, including military to military on the ground. And we'll continue to have those conversations.
What's your reaction to the Turkish and Russian cooperation in Al-Bab?
I'm not aware of specific Turkish-Russian cooperation in Al-Bab, and I'll leave that to Turkey and Russia to speak to.
Is that the first time the coalition in support of Turkey in Al-Bab or near Al-Bab?
I don't know if it's the first time. I'm just pointing the most. This happened last week, as I understand it.
Did they request just overflight, or did they request that you drop ordnance?
I don't know the exact details of it, but I know there was a request for support because of forces under fire, and we responded to that.
Are you now supporting Turkey in the Al-Bab operation? Because I know previously you weren't.
As I said, we are working every day, including today, with all of our partners in Iraq and Syria with regard to the counter-ISIL effort. And that includes Turkey in Syria and their efforts, their substantial efforts against ISIL. And we're going to do that in the most productive and efficient way possible. And we are going to expend every effort we can to make sure that we're doing this in the most effective way possible.
Bob, so if this is in fact the first time coalition air support has been provided for the Turks in that area, what's changed? Because the operation's been going on for a while now, and I know Colonel Dorrian and others from OIR have made the explicit point that the coalition is not involved at all with the Al-Bab operation. So I'm just kind of curious, where was the...
I think it reflects part of our ongoing conversation with Turkey. Again, the coalition's focus on ISIL and trying to make sure that we're keeping as much pressure on ISIL as we can. And certainly the Syrian forces that are there, the opposition forces that are there, and with the support of the Turkish military are carrying out a significant effort against ISIL. And we think that's a good thing. But we're trying to coordinate support in the best way possible, and that's part of the give and take that's going on with Turkey right now.
Follow-up. I mean, you said the discussions were even going on today about further cooperation.
They're happening every day. We have people on the ground working these issues.
Understood. Now, are these conversations designed to just sort of maintain the status quo as far as the relationship between Turkish forces and OIR, or is this Al-Bab sort of development kind of driving towards a more like an evolution of these talks, leading to possibly joint operations?
We've worked
integration
jointly, as you know, with Turkey in Syria. They're a member of the coalition, a critical member of the coalition, and we will continue to work closely with Turkey. We're trying to deal with this situation in the most efficient way possible to keep multiple pressure on ISIL, and to do this in an efficient fashion. And again, I'm not going to get into every single discussion we're having with our Turkish ally, but these are extensive conversations at the highest levels, and also obviously even on the ground, military to military.
So is the goal then to get Turkey involved in the coalition?
The goal is to defeat ISIL, and it is a goal that we and Turkey share. And in light of ISIL's claim to be responsible for the terror attack on New Year's Eve in Turkey, you can see all the more reason why Turkey has a significant interest in this, why we would like to do everything we can to help Turkey in that effort, and the coalition would as well. This is about not only ejecting ISIL from Syria and Iraq, it's about protecting our homelands, and that includes Turkey, and that includes the United States. Barbara.
You have consistently said from the podium that you do not discuss those wounded in action, but of course, that's all due respect, that's not exactly true for the administration. The White House, point number one, has publicly acknowledged when the president goes to the hospitals to visit recently wounded members. You have a website that posts wounded in action that your own staff says is not regularly updated. So, in the last couple of weeks before this secretary leaves office, I want to ask again if you wouldn't find a way to provide an accurate number of U.S. service members wounded in action in Syria and Iraq in the fight against ISIS.
We provide that update now.
Your own staff says that is not.
We provide that update now. There are privacy issues, Barbara, and our policy has been set, and we're going to stick with our policy. And we provide that number. We update that number on a regular basis.
Well, I think that's probably not a very regular basis. So I'm asking, that's fine. I'm asking now for an updated number of the number of American service members wounded in Iraq and Syria. I would like an updated number reflecting the case that this gentleman is talking about, the most up-to-date information you have.
I will check with our team, with OIR and CENTCOM, and we will provide you the updated number.
You say you don't acknowledge the wounded, but then, of course, there's all these ways in which you do.
I'm not talking about a specific instance. There are privacy issues here.
I'm not violating anyone's privacy issue. I am asking you, you say you don't acknowledge the wounded.
We do acknowledge it, Barbara. We acknowledge it with an updated number that we provide, and we will provide you that number.
Well, let's have an absolutely up-to-date number, if you wouldn't mind. The other thing I wanted to ask you, can you take the question about this Turkish the mission to protect the Turkish forces. You said that U.S. forces did respond. Can you please take the question, did they in fact drop ordnance?
My understanding is, from what I understand, that they did not drop ordnance in this instance. It was a show of force in response to forces coming under fire.
And my last question is it correct, can you clarify, is it correct, have U.S. forces now at various points entered the city limits of Mosul?
Yeah, I know this is a question you've had previously, others have as well. We're not going to talk about the disposition of U.S. forces in and around Mosul specifically, for understandable reasons, Barbara, because we don't want to give the enemy any more of an ability to understand where our people might be. And
it's said in the past that it's up to General Townsend to actually make that decision.
it is. As the forward line of troops moves, U.S. forces and coalition forces will adjust as well. But I'm not going to tell you where they are at this particular moment in time.
I'm asking where they are at this particular time. I am asking whether or not there has been reason for them at any point to enter the city limits.
I'm not going to answer that question because I don't want to give our enemy any idea where those forces might be at any particular moment in time, whether it's today, yesterday, or in the future.
And you said on North Korea that...
As to a coalition airstrike that took place today in Idlib province, local reports are saying that more than 25 leaders from Nusra Front were killed in the airstrike.
Joe, I don't have any more information for you on that airstrike. I'm hearing from you about this airstrike, so.
Thank you.
Seconds old tweet from President-elect Donald Trump saying, quote, "There should be no further releases from Gitmo. These are extremely dangerous people and should not be allowed back onto the battlefield." I was wondering what your reaction is to that.
As I've discussed previously here, we're going to carry out the appropriate policies as set forth by the Commander-in-Chief with regard to Guantanamo Bay, and the Secretary of Defense in his carrying out his responsibilities as Secretary of Defense, his unique responsibilities with regard to the review of people who have been previously determined to be eligible for release, and he's going to continue to carry out his responsibilities as appropriate until he's finished as Secretary of Defense.
Knowing the future Commander-in-Chief does not want some of these folks released.
There's one Commander-in-Chief at a time, and the Secretary of Defense will continue to carry out his responsibilities as he sees appropriate.
Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. Por internet te conocí, me agregaste y yo accedí. Pasó el tiempo y nunca entendí. Esto es un viaje, el equipaje, traes ropa, traigo traje. Esto es verdad, no es un montaje. Y tampoco unos bullying que terminan en chantaje. Y no me das bola ahora, justo que ya me compré el pasaje. Un like una vez me diste y en GIF tu mensaje repetiste. ¿Hace cuántos frames que me escribiste? Favorité ese tweet que dijiste. Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. Joven y metalera, joven y pan rockera. Antes de la internet existía una vieja era. Yo no sé qué es mejor, yo no sé lo que era. De la internet somos ahora las prisioneras. De la internet somos ahora las prisioneras. Eras. De la internet somos ahora las prisioneras. De la internet somos ahora las prisioneras. Las prisioneras. Las prisioneras. Las prisioneras. Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. Por internet te conocí, me agregaste y yo accedí. Pasó el tiempo y nunca entendí. Esto es un viaje, el equipaje, traes ropa, traigo traje. Esto es verdad, no es un montaje, ni tampoco unos bullying que terminan en chantaje. Y no me das bola ahora, justo que ya me compré el pasaje. Un like una vez me diste y en GIF tu mensaje repetiste. ¿Hace cuántos frames que me escribiste? Favorité ese tweet que dijiste. Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. Joven y metalera, joven y pan rockera. Antes de la internet existía una vieja era. Yo no sé qué es mejor, yo no sé lo que era. De la internet somos ahora las prisioneras. De la internet somos ahora las prisioneras. Eras. De la internet somos ahora las prisioneras. De la internet somos ahora las prisioneras. Las prisioneras. Las prisioneras. Las prisioneras. Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gustaba Sepultura War for Territory. Quisiera ser actriz de GIF y postearte letras con parental advisory. Y a mí que me gusta